Thank you everybody for coming out tonight. Now that Bart's settled, at least we have a way to get home. My name is Paul Fouts. I'm the Dean of the Gino School of Business, and it's through the Entrepreneurship Center at the Gino School that we're hosting this event. I want to start by just thanking a few folks who helped make this possible before introducing you to the panel. Mary Jean Kuntz, Peter Freeman, and Phil Dillard are instructors at the Gino School who teach in the entrepreneurship program, and they helped organize and put this off, and I want to thanks to them. Also to Kendra Calvert, our marketing director, for helping organize this. Now we have, in addition to these kinds of forum, we also have some classes that we offer, short 4-week classes meet on Saturdays. Phil is about to teach one, starts in November, first week of November, on, the exact title is Adaptive Business Planning. So I encourage you all to register for that and go visit it. We're going to start tonight with our panel and our panel discussion talking about pivoting. I think it's nice that we have a relatively small turnout because everybody's going to be able to get involved in the discussion and the questions, and so it'll be a nice intimate event. And Heather Hiles is going to be our moderator for tonight's event. Let me go back just a quick second. After the panel discussion, we've got 2 companies that are going to be presenting their pivot stories, and then they and the panel will have a discussion and hopefully give them some advice, and that'll be after the panel starts. So first with the panel, Heather Hiles. Heather's founder and CEO of PathBright. It's a learning and career portfolio platform. She spent her whole life really in the education and employment achievement space for both youth and adults. She's been actively involved in this for over 20 years, which is hard to believe. She must have started when she was 3. During which she's founded and led several private and public sector organizations. She was a commissioner on San Francisco Unified School District, executive director, Silicon Valley Social Venture Fund, co-founder EARN, Individual Development Accounts Program, CEO SF Works, which is an NGO to place women from welfare into careers, and a COO for Break the Cycle for K-3 grade tutorial. She's got her BA from UC Berkeley and an MBA from Yale. We haven't been able to get her educated here at Golden Gate yet, but we have hopes. So I'm going to turn this over to Heather and let her take control and introduce you to the rest of the panel. Thank you.
We really appreciate your presence here tonight, and I also was very excited to hear that there was going to be a webcast for those folks who weren't sure about the BART situation or what have you. So thank you all for participating, whether you're here in person or online. Just in terms of the format, to get a little bit more specific about it, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce our panelists. They're a very esteemed and knowledgeable and experienced group. And they're going to give you a little synopsis or flavor of some of their experiences, maybe highlight something that has some pivot or the experience involved in it. And then we're going to, I'm going to throw out some questions to try and get these 3 to engage a little bit more among themselves. And then I will open it up to audience questions. So it should be fun. I think this will be a great group. So my first panelist here to my left is Allan Young, and he actually founded his venture capital fund, his first venture capital fund, directly out of college. You were still in college. I can't really wrap my mind around that. He was still in college, and so he and some of his college his colleagues in other colleges, they all got together and created a venture capital fund that has been wildly successful. They have a wonderful track record. Almost 50% of the companies in the portfolio have IPO'd. So pretty impressive stuff in different industries and sectors, and so we'll get to hear about that. He's also, though, Allan also has experience. He's founded Runway, which is the biggest incubator here in San Francisco, and has his own experience with doing startups as well. So a really wonderful career. I'm sure there are some exciting pivots to share with us.
Thank you.
And then I've got Joanna Rees, who's also both, I think it's fair to say, not only has been a venture capitalist, but is also a social entrepreneur, in that you have given back with your political leadership and thoughts, as well as teaching at Santa Clara University. And so there are a lot of rich experiences to talk about, not only participating with New Schools Venture Fund, but all of your work with the venture capital funds you've participated in. You are now a managing director at Endeavor Catalyst, is that right? Yeah, okay, great. So there's going to be such good stuff to hear about. And then finally, last but not least, we have Bill Shelander. Is that correct? Shelander, okay, great. Who is currently in charge of business development for the Berkeley Lab. Am I getting that right? Okay, great. And has, again, has the great wealth of experience ranging from being the CEO of a startup company all the way to acting as a venture capitalist. So he's seen the whole spectrum of experiences, and also has some slides with cartoons, which is also very exciting. So with that said, I'm going to actually invite each of you to give a brief story about a pivot experience. It may be the case that I was invited to moderate this panel because I am in the throes of a startup company myself. And excuse me, last year, when shortly after I launched my EdTech software, we were aimed at the consumer space. And I gave us a few months at seeing what kind of a take-up rate we could get in the consumer space. And by September, made the decision that we, in fact, wanted to be selling our software into enterprises, into universities and post-secondary institutions, and have still been kind of catching up product-wise and with the ramifications of selling into institutions. Those are big pivots, and there are, I think, as entrepreneurs and people who work with entrepreneurs, we see people evolve their thinking and refine it every single day, which is maybe a little bit different from a market pivot where you have to make a really high-stake decision that's going to take your business in a whole different direction. And those are some of the challenging times where you really consult with everybody you can, and you do a lot of maybe meditation and soul searching to figure out whether you're prepared to make that kind of a pivot. And so I think that that's the thing that we want to talk about tonight, is that kind of big pivot kind of moment. So with that, as a setup, I'll turn it over to you, Allan. Tell us what you think.
Sure, I think for me, pivot just means organized change. You know, there's as a entrepreneur, as a founder, there's so many different decisions, and from small little decisions to large decisions that we can make every day, and there are so many opportunities to make the wrong decisions, right? Your startup is constantly changing anyways, but a pivot is kind of a formal, organized change based on evidence, and usually the evidence is kind of based on failure. My first startup that I personally founded was right after I left our venture fund, and we started off in creating social media widgets. We were competing against companies like Slide, if you recall those. We just thought we would do a better widget, more rich, more media, and it just didn't work. And luckily we had enough money left in the bank to try something entirely new, and we ended up getting into using a lot of the same technology, but applying it differently, and we ended up creating retargeting software. We were one of the pioneers in retargeting, and we really hit our stride with that. Found a lot of customers, and the company was eventually sold to Rakuten, which is one of the biggest e-commerce companies in the world, probably the e-commerce giant of Asia. It's the Amazon of Asia, and they wanted our technology, they wanted our customer base, they wanted our revenue base, that's my experience with pivoting. I've watched it at my incubator. I've watched it with my peers at Y Combinator. I started a company that was backed by Y Combinator as well, so saw a lot of my batchmates do pivots. So none of this is from an academic background. It's more from from being a practitioner. But the way I think about it is it's organized change that's backed by some kind of evidence.
Thank you. I wanted to interject for one moment, and I had said that I was going to ask the audience about themselves. And I just wonder if, with show of hands, if we can get a sense of how many of you all in the audience are in the process of starting up companies or running startup companies currently. Great, very helpful to know who we're talking with. Other folks considering it, possibly? Any show of hands considering it? Okay, great.
Everyone should raise their hands.
Well, I don't know. That's not for everybody. And other just interested parties? Okay, great. Other interested parties, great. Thank you. So, sorry, Joanna, I just wanted
I'm happy to see the people on your team are wanting to start up their own companies.
Yes, they've got work to do right now.
That's what you said, everyone.
You're right.
Well, first of all, when I think about my own background, I was an entrepreneur who founded a venture capital firm because I founded a venture firm with no venture capital experience. And there were many, many pivots, which I can share a couple of those. But ultimately raised a series of funds, about $450 million, and served on the board of more than 25 venture-backed companies. And when I was thinking about this, I thought every single company I was invested in pivoted. In fact, the ones that failed were the ones who weren't willing to pivot. They got so caught, so invested in and so wed to their original idea that they didn't have the flexibility to really be open to kind of taking those, a new turn or a new path. And it's tough as an entrepreneur because in one sense you want to hold on to your big vision and your idea, because the easiest thing to hear from anyone is no, it will work. But then, it's that kind of fine line of what market input do you take, what expertise and different just contribution you take from the outside to figure out kind of when to pivot. And it's interesting now because I'm helping a lot of entrepreneurs in emerging markets. We call them high impact entrepreneurs. These are entrepreneurs who want to build $100 million to $1 billion businesses, but in places where most people think they don't exist. And it's harder to get entrepreneurs in emerging markets to pivot because failure is it's a bad word, and so they get very set, in what they're going to do, and the fear of making those pivots is tough. So it takes a lot of coaching and mentoring. And just so I said that I raised a venture capital fund with no venture experience. The early pivot I got was I couldn't raise a fund from day one. So what I did is I said, why don't I do private placements? I had come out of investment banking. I knew how to help early stage companies raise capital. I said, I'll do private placements, but rather than taking cash, I'll take equity. And over the course of 2 years, I had equity in about 15 different companies. So it looked like a portfolio, but it was a real kind of pivot to actually get a portfolio. And that really helped. The other was I thought I would raise capital from traditional sources, university endowments and pension funds, but I needed to have validators. So I actually went out to my competitors. I went to funds like Benchmark Capital and US Venture Partners and Brentwood, and I got them out of their management company to invest in my fund, and that was an unbelievable way of validating what I was doing, and then their investors saw that they were invested in another venture capital fund, and it gave me a lot of credibility and allowed me to move forward. So those were just two pivots in the beginning. All yours.
Thank you. And I guess I came a more traditional route. I was an engineer and had worked for a big corporation, and then I heard about this thing called venture capital. It sounded pretty cool. So I came out to business school in California from the East Coast, and I really wanted to be in venture capital, but I had no experience whatsoever. But finally got into a Japanese venture capital firm with Nomura Securities, largely because they didn't know what they were doing either. So we kind of learned together on some of these things. But in the course of that, one of my better investments started out in a garage in Maryland. And the guy had been fired from his job back in the 80s. And he had developed a way to do fibers in which he could split off the different colors within a fiber. And he thought he'd make a component that could just split off blue light and green light and yellow light. And literally, he was in his garage when we met him, and he was down to his last few months of rent that he could pay, and desperately needed money. And we were saying, who are your competitors? And it was AT&T, Bell Labs, and British Telecom. You know, they're the only competitors really that I have. And we started working on that technology and improving it, realized that he could be more nimble than the big companies and could do things a lot cheaper. But when we finally went to the customers, they were saying, well, we don't want a little fiber, we want a subsystem here, so you got to put more money into this. And from the venture capitalist point of view, we had to put in about $3 or $4 million more when we had only put in 1 or 2 to begin with. So this is a big ask to be done at that point. And then we built the subsystem, showed that that could fit into some of the existing central office equipment. And when we went back to the customer, asked for, why don't you make a purchase order now? I said, we don't really want a subcomponent. We'd like a whole system here that we could just replace everything. And that's another $8 to $12 million to do that. And venture capitalists are feeling pretty, the deep pocket does have a bottom to it eventually. And we got more diluted by asking more investors to come in, but we then did a system and built it. It took months more, half a year longer to do. And ultimately, when they did a test, we sat back and we were going to wait for a 3-year field test. And we had the financing for it, but we were going to scrape by just barely. And 3 months later, into a 3-year test, we got our first purchase order of $50 million. It was a big pivot point to make each of those decisions, to dig deeper. Yes, we're on the right track. This is going to work, and to just have the faith to do that. It's really gratifying. And within 16 months, it was the largest venture-backed IPO in history up until that time.
What year was that?
1992.
These are such great stories. One of the questions that comes to mind for me is you're referencing different, first of all, the attributes of being flexible versus knowing when to stick to your guns. And I'm wondering what combination of empirical data or other kinds of sources of advice or what have you, how would you recommend people go about making their own decisions about whether they should pivot or not? Do you look at just the numbers, or how do you do that? Yeah.
So I always say it's really important to have trusted advisors, people with lots of expertise and deep experience in the sectors in which, or the sector in which you're trying to compete or build your business, that you can go to and ask any question. I always ask CEOs, what are their pajama fits? What are those things that are really keeping them up at night? And really have a group of people that you can go and share that with, and really wrestle with the ideas of, should we stay on this path or should we go somewhere else? I feel like so often, especially if somebody has a team and has put together a formal board, entrepreneurs often underutilize their boards. They view the board as much more of a reporting body, and don't have those in-depth, you're shaking your head, those in-depth deep conversations with their boards about, what are those critical issues. I always say that you should leave, as a board member, you should leave a board meeting with knowing kind of the 2 big strategic issues that the company is wrestling with. But I think it's really important to have trusted advisors around you so that when you're getting market data, you're getting all of this different input, you can go to people who have a wealth of experience that can help you see through whether we stay on course or whether it's time to pivot.
I'm going to add to that because I have found that in every one of these situations, you are not certain. There is no clear-cut answer to how to put that algorithm together. But you are always collecting more information. So as you're saying, you had a vision originally, but you're constantly learning new information as you go along. And if that information is confirming your original vision, then you keep going. If it's not, that's when you need to pivot. And likewise, out of the 50 or so companies that I invested in, not one of them succeeded in the original vision. They all shift, some less than others, but they all have to shift. And you will never make that with perfect information. You will always have to make the best guess you can. Trust your advisors as much as you can, but half of them will say, go this way, and half of them say, go that way.
Right.
And you will have to make that choice, and you'll let them die by that.
Yeah. One really important question you should ask yourself if you're the entrepreneur, whether you should pivot or not, is how much money do you have left, right? If you don't have a lot of money left, you can't pivot. There's not a lot of pivoting you can do. So it's down to the wire, and you got to find a customer or something. And if you happen to have enough runway left in your bank account, then you have the luxury of making a pivot. But if you're trying to make a decision to pivot kind of on the fly and reactionary, I think that's the wrong approach to making pivots or change. This is so faddish, the term. But you should have an idea when you're going into developing a product or service and taking it to market. You should be deciding ahead of time, what are we going to look at? What are the metrics we're going to look at so that we can decide we're on the wrong path or we're on the right path. And if you're making those decisions on the fly, reactionary, as you're taking it to market, you're not deciding ahead of time which way you will go. So I think identifying very early on with Pathbright, you probably have a sense, okay, if we're going to give ourselves 6 months to go after the consumer market, and the metrics should show this. And if it doesn't show this, then we know we will pivot before the 6 months comes to a head, right? So we've decided 6 months ahead, we're going to pivot if this doesn't work. So I think that, with almost any venture that you get involved in, you can come up with, a list of metrics that you can measure yourself against. And hopefully, you get enough evidence to be able to say, we know we can make a pivot, and you get the evidence with enough time left, with enough runway left, and you can say we can make a pivot. Because you either run out of money or you run out of time. It's really the same thing.
I also think, Allan, you make an incredibly important point about metrics, because so often I see someone with a new company idea, or they come to me for financing, and their metrics would be this blown up income statement that had year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which was precisely wrong on the day it was put together, because there's no way it was going to work out exactly that way. But when you pushed on what are the underlying metrics that are the key drivers of your business, so often entrepreneurs couldn't answer that question, which is the key question. So stick to metrics and don't worry about the income statement from my point of view.
Yeah.
And that gets to that trite sort of saying, fail fast. There's some truth to that, but the key is, what is it that you want to measure that's going to answer that question as quickly and as cheaply as possible, so that you have funds left over to go somewhere else. But that's where be self-critical to what is it that I need to know or I should know that will tell me which way I should go as quickly and as cheaply as possible.
And is it important to get buy-in from your board members, your investors, other stakeholders around those metrics you're being measured by?
You will never get complete consensus on that, so you should talk to them. They are your allies. They want you to succeed. They're not there to watch you burn money. that they want you to succeed. So ask their advice, but be honest with them, and then say, I'm going to go this direction because, and explain it.
But I think you get buy-in on the key metrics. I mean, that's what hopefully you do an award meeting, you get buy-in on the key metrics, and that's what you're continually presenting and how you're updating your investors on how the business is doing. So I think that's important to do up front and make sure everyone's super clear about what are those metrics and are we all on the same sheet of paper. And if we don't have buy-in, let's keep working on them until we do. So we're measuring performance together.
I wonder about the sources of creativity that you all have, and the entrepreneurs that you work with have, in order to, when they're considering a pivot and considering exploring a new customer base or what have you, what are those sources of inspiration? For example, Allan, that you came across when you decided to really pivot with your business. How do you find that inspiration?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm like a terribly creative guy. I think for me, coming up with an idea involves looking at what exists and then trying to find something different that hasn't been done or isn't being done very well. Just trying. I think being different is the crux of creativity. I think that I try to keep it very simple that way. So no one was doing, or very few people were doing retargeting. There were a ton of people that were in social media widgets and little apps for social networks, and we just couldn't find enough differentiation. So I think you can chalk up creativity as a source of our success in moving into retargeting, advertising retargeting. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just, hey, out of necessity, we had to find something that could be very different.
But you also decided to find that unmet need, retargeting, and build the whole response.
Maybe that's not creativity. Maybe it's just being really observant about what's
Yeah, I think it's really about listening to the market and make sure that when you're listening, also you're asking the right questions. There was a company I was invested in that was asynchronous storage virtualization. They had 65 engineers already on the team. They were building an incredibly complex, very expensive technology. And they were out talking to technical buyers and large corporations who were saying, when they were showing them the feature set, they were saying, wow, exciting. They were never saying, where does this fall in your buying? Is this something that you would be interested in buying in a year or 2 years? What are your priorities? So they weren't asking the right questions in the beginning to figure out, is this, and what we did was, the product that they were building was essentially a Ferrari, and what the market was willing to buy was a Volkswagen. And so, because they weren't asking the right questions, they were overbuilding and building something way too complex and expensive for the market in terms of what anybody was willing to buy in the near term. So we went out, talked to a bunch of people, really listened, and scaled the product way back. And went with a scaled back, lower cost product, they were able to finally get some market traction. But it's listening and it's asking the right questions.
In my experience, I'm very mathematical, so I think about operations research and linear programming, where you take extreme points and maxima and minima, and I'm looking for, when you characterize a business or an opportunity, it's what are the extremes, and which of these extremes should you be? Should you be the Ferrari or the cheapest Volkswagen? Should you be the fastest thing on the market or the slowest thing that's cheap? And just look at those extremes. In my own activity, when I first got into this Japanese venture capital firm, they were the shunned venture capital group on Sand Hill Road because they're foreign. You're a foreign company, don't you get it, Bill? You're not with us. You're not one of us. So you'll get the dregs of the deals, and we'll send them to you once we can't find anybody else. But you're foreign, so don't.
They call that dumb money.
Yeah. And I was going, I don't want to be the loser here. So I finally said, what is it about being foreign that actually could be an advantage? And we could open the door to Asia. And if I use my firm to be the doorway to Asia, that changes the dimensions completely. And so, yes, I am foreign. I don't want to compete with all the other U.S. firms. But when you're ready for an international firm, I'm your first international firm to call. And it just flipped everything around. And we went from literally the lowest 10% performance to the top 10 performance in venture capital.
Yeah, I want to open it up to questions, but one thing I can't help but notice is that you all have taken very unique approaches and kind of hacked your way into where you wanted to be. And it's very inspiring. I think that that's one thing that's the kind of universal of all entrepreneurs, is that we all hack into solving some kind of problem or doing what it is that we set out to do. And so you just take it a disadvantage, make it your advantage, or you work with the funds and the best funds and the best VCs, and you make your own fund out of it, whatever it takes. It's very interesting. Well, I want to open up the questions to the audience, and so I'm going to ask you to please say your name and ask a question.
I'll go first, yeah. So at Runway, we have 70 companies. We started in January of this year, and we've already had 4 companies get acquired out of Runway as an incubator, and the average acquisition price is about $45 million. Currently, we have a company that is called Recognize, and they started off with doing an enterprise SaaS product that helped individual team members within enterprises recognize and give rewards and awards to each other. Because it used to flow, or it still does flow from the top managers giving awards to employees. And then they thought, well, we probably might be able to do something awesome if it was employees giving rewards to each other. And it turns out that hasn't really gotten a lot of traction. Not a lot of corporations believe in that. But then, so then they figure out, and the metric they used was just, how often each employee. There's several metrics. They were measuring engagement. How often does each employee log into the system and try to look for ways to reward each other, and how many rewards were actually being given, right? And it wasn't happening. And then they decided, okay, well, these metrics prove that we're on the wrong path. And then they pivoted and pitched the idea to a major airline and said, hey, maybe your customers are willing to reward your frontline employees for great service. And it's sort of working, right? And they have new metrics this time. They decided, well, how often. These are really weird metrics. They're not income based, as you mentioned. It's not about income that early on. And so, they were trying to measure, how often the employees themselves would want to teach or, evangelize the possibility of customers using this platform to reward them, to reward employees for good service. And they were measuring, how often customers, customer engagement. So the end customer, how often did they come back and use it to make a comment on, hey, this employee in the checkout, the check-in counter was really, really helpful, or whatever, and they would, you could just give a reward, but you could also type in comments, and you could measure the people that were typing in comments were more passionate about it, so then they wanted to drive more comments, more qualitative answers. And so they would say, well, how many actions involved customers giving, taking the time to put in comments? And that's measuring engagement. And then if they have the qualitative data, then they can turn around and show the major airline, hey, this is what's happening, it's working, and you should renew the contract, etc. And so it's starting to work. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, getting down to fundamentals. I'll give a couple of examples. I remember back in, I think it was 2000, I saw eToys. I don't know if anyone ever remembers that company, but I remember the entrepreneurs came in and presented it, and they had this income statement, back to the beginning, and they showed how the revenue line was going to keep going up. But when you broke it down to the key metrics, which was how much it cost to acquire a customer, how much that customer was going to spend on average per year, and what the margin structure was, it took about 11 years to pay back the cost of acquiring a customer. So when you brought that up to them and said, I don't get it, they said, no, we'll just raise more money and we'll grow faster, but just making a bigger loss. So And by the way, that I got yelled at by investors in our fund because we didn't finance it. Sequoia Capital, I remember, financed it at $1.3 billion. And the company ultimately went out of business because the underlying metrics just did not work. But it's also, I think you make a great point about understanding who your ultimate customer is. I was invested in a company called Danger. We created a product called the Sidekick. This is pre-iPhone. It used to flip open. And we could have looked at our metrics as, how many units we sold, but the key metric was how much additional revenue could we generate for the carrier, because the carrier, T-Mobile, who was our launch carrier, was ultimately our revenue partner. So if we could, not just look at what would be, if you were looking at the basic fundamentals of the business and looked at units sold, or that would not have been the right number. The right number was us going deep, even though the carrier was the one generating the revenue. We had to prove to them that we were generating more revenue for them, and also making sure that the turnover of their customer was absolutely, the churn was reduced, because with that product we were able to do upgrades on the product with the download of software. This is again pre-iPhone, so this was like this. Andy Rubin, in fact, was one of our co-founders, and then he went to Google and started Android. It might not be obvious what metrics to follow, but think about the customer in terms of figuring out those metrics.
Didn't Microsoft do it by you?
Microsoft bought, so we were about to, just as a quick little, so we filed our S1, we were ready to go public, and we knew what Andy had left and already gone to Google and what he was starting to create. And Microsoft offered us a cash offer for $500 million in $1. And I remember I was on a board call, people said, oh, we're leaving money on the table and we should just go public. And we finally got to consensus, as you know how hard that is, and agreed to sell the company a bird in the hand, even though the cash value was much lower than what we thought our offering price would have been. And were we thrilled? I have no idea what Microsoft even did with the technology, but we got $500 million for it.
Yeah.
And then I invested in the first low price round, so I was really excited.
Amazing.
To expand on what Joanna said there, it's look at the systems, cost the full picture of this stuff. When I was a product manager right out of business school for a cryogenics company, we make liquid nitrogen, liquid oxygen. And when I first took over, they said, I need to build 10 new plants in North America. And the engineering department says, we'll build you the cheapest plant possible on the tons per day. And economies of scale, you build this giant plant in the middle of America, and that's it, you're done. And the operating people said, yes, we want to have the lowest maintenance costs, so we want the most expensive equipment possible, so we have low maintenance costs every year. That's our metric, that's what we get judged on. And when I was responsible for the bottom line, and when I started looking at the details of how all this gets put together, I finally went to the sales guys and said, what did the customers say? And it turns out they would buy from the closest production plant. So if I had one plant in the middle of Kansas, I would have no customers anywhere else. So I made a choice at that point. We had to figure it all out, but make 10 different plants spread out all over America so that we were the closest plant to every metropolitan area in the U.S. And we were not the cheapest product, but we had the most sales from there on. We started stealing market share from our competitors, and we wound up being the most profitable company there.
It's like the mini steel mills,
Yeah.
Yes.
but for chemicals. Cool.
You all are talking about such important, giving such important advice around customer development, finding who your customers are, understanding your market, understanding, asking the right questions. Do you have any other advice about how to do that? Especially if you think that there is a particular market out there that you don't know very well, but you're considering it or wanting to explore? Sure.
That's a good straight line. There's a program called ICOR going on right now, and Steve Blank is leading it. It's a NSF, National Science Foundation program. They will give you $50,000 to attend this course. And it's an 8-week course, but part of the requirement is no matter how good your idea, you have to go talk to 100 customers. And the program managers that I've talked to, class after class, say the first 20 customers that the entrepreneur talked to says, damn, those are stupid people. They just don't know what I'm selling. And then the next 20, they said, well, maybe I need to price it differently or something. right around 60 interviews with customers, people begin to realize, maybe I'm selling the wrong thing and there's something else I should be selling. And this is that pivot point that you get to when you finally realize what it is, the value that you're selling. So it is the customers. Talk to the customers.
And it's called iPort?
iPort.
Okay.
Yeah, I even, so when I launched my first venture capital fund, the world didn't need another venture capital fund. There was plenty of money out there. But I was helping early stage companies raise capital from venture capital funds, and I was surprised at the high failure rate. So I looked at 150 tech companies that failed, and 98% of them actually built the technology they said they would. They failed because they didn't understand their markets and their customers. And so I thought if you could take a market-driven approach to tech investing, you should have a better chance of success. And I actually, the tagline for the fund was good marketing and sales beat great technology. I put Steve Blank on my advisory board. But it was all about getting out into the market and testing ideas and not just going out and hearing the validation, because we listen with filters, especially if we like what we're talking about, is really getting out there and making sure you're listening in an open way and really finding, you want people to challenge you. You want, and not just look in narrow sectors either, look more broadly. So it's so important, I think, the idea of getting out there and talking to as many potential customers, whether those are individuals or corporations or whoever else.
Yeah, get good at sales, and by that I don't mean just, well, you can show like a huge top line revenue growth. I mean, because a lot of potential customers, or who you think would be potential customers, will say, oh, that's nice, and yeah, I think I might buy, and they're not being honest with you. Very few people will say, no, I don't want that, or you're going down the wrong road. And so if you're good, what I mean by get good at sales is getting customers to commit to giving you money. And potential customers say, hey, that's a nice feature, or oh, I think you're 60% of the way there, and if you get this and that, then I might be interested in. And then, feature requests sort of kill you, but it's a way for potential customers to put off making a decision, or politely say no, say you're not good enough yet. Just if you get good at extracting purchase orders, then you know you have something.
Other questions from the audience?
Oh, hi, I'm Virgie. Actually, my company is in the program I was talking about, and we're in the midst of the 45th interview and week 3 of that program. And honestly speaking, all 3 of us are feuding over which direction to go. So, and I, with the market research background, I'm saying, well, we just need 15 more and we'll know. Okay. So my question to the panel is, how do you work with I don't want to say we're feuding, but in a team in disagreement when people are thinking to go 2 or 3 different ways? What are your thoughts on how people are brought in to facilitate, to kind of, probably one of the directions is the right direction, but how to use sort of outsiders, if you were, in the beginning stages? We don't have a board yet.
So, and are you all 3 co-founders?
Yes.
So the question is, if I may summarize, it's just, if you have, what do you do if there are different strategies you could take, and you have, say, 3 co-founders, and you all think you should pursue different directions? What do you do?
Don't have co-founders?
Yeah, that's where I would go with that.
Are you a solo founder?
I'm a single founder.
Legally, I am a single founder.
Okay.
Are you the CEO?
Yeah.
So I would, trying to help you out there, I would ask my other co-founders, talk to them about having a process where you bring in someone, a respected, advisor or facilitator for a dialogue with the 3 of you.
Right.
I have you each kind of put in names, but pick one of their names so they feel committed to the process. Hopefully it's someone that you still respect. And try to get to what are the underlying assumptions or issues that are pushing each of you in the specific direction you're going in, whether those are just assumptions about the market space or they're things about the individual. If someone has a propensity maybe to have more of a technical orientation, they might want to take more of a technical approach. I don't know what the issues are, but I would try to kind of unpack, kind of all the layers of what, is kind of getting everyone to take the specific position and have someone respect and facilitate that process so you can get down to the core fundamentals and try to find some common ground.
Okay, thank you, you're hired, Joanna.
We have to ask your co-founders.
Okay, I think if, I don't know if there's maybe one last question out there, because if folks are ready, we're going to shift gears and then hear from the entrepreneurs. So any other burning questions?
I actually want to share something kind of funny about, so there was an idea that a friend of mine out of Spain was thinking about doing, but he wanted to do it as a nonprofit. He thought, oh, this will be a great nonprofit. And he said, there's all of these broadband connections all over the world, and what if you could, through a software, open source software, allow people to download the software onto their current Wi-Fi routers that allowed them to share Wi-Fi. So if any bandwidth they weren't using at home, they could share their unused bandwidth, and you could create a consumer-driven, individual-driven global Wi-Fi network. And nobody would take interest in what he was doing because it was a nonprofit. So he flipped, and he said, I'm going to turn it into a for-profit, and I guess I'll make it a for-profit company, even though he wasn't planning to do it. It's a company called FON. It's now the world's largest Wi-Fi network. He raised money from Sequoia Capital and eBay and Index Ventures, and a great group of investors, but it was a funny pivot, because he really wanted to do something. He was going to put his own money to fund, the nonprofit, but no one would partner with him, because they didn't take him seriously, because they didn't think he would be committed to creating something of scale and of value. So just kind of a funny pivot.
Great story.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. And actually, Joanna, that made me think about just the issue of passion and commitment. Sometimes what I've seen with co-founders who are working together but have different interests, kind of can pull them in different directions, maybe because they have different underlying passions of what they really want to be doing. And I think if that happens to come to the forefront, then possibly that's a time for people to pursue the different passions that they have. Because I think it does take a lot of underlying commitment to the idea and trying to get it to be successful, of whatever that kind of notion is. But
And their ultimate, I think you're bringing up the point, and I'm curious if you all agree, but I think there ultimately has to be a leader of an organization. In this process of working with Endeavor, supporting these entrepreneurs in emerging markets, we go through a very rigorous selection process to provide a lot of supportive services. And often it's a team of 2 or 3 co-founders, but there definitely has to be, they defer to the leader at some point. And if you don't see that in the co-founding team, if there isn't that respect to have the person who ultimately makes that final decision, and that the co-founding team is going to be behind that, then that it's just not going to work.
Well, and in fact, just to extend that, and I'd be interested in your feedback on this, but I remember very distinctly talking to my board about the pivot that I wanted to make, and laid out all the facts, and there were differing opinions on the board. At the end of the day, they said, we invested in you, Heather, to make this decision, and you should make the final decision about where to go. I mean, that's why you're here. So I don't know. I think at some level, it is about the entrepreneur and trusting their judgment.
I would definitely agree, and Joanna was much more touchy-feely than I would have been initially there, actually trying it, but it is stepping back to, on your question there about when there's disagreement, there is a potential that they have a point to make. So you do need to, am I being the belligerent one, or is it them? But why? Dig down into it. What is it that the point they're trying to make? If it's just bad behavior, ultimately somebody has to make a decision, and there needs to be a different direction, a different pathway. But yes, I do recommend trying to understand, why is this person so adamant about a position? They may have a good point.
Excellent. Great. So I think now we're going to shift gears and hear from our entrepreneurs. And so the first person I wanted to invite up is Aaron Tolson from Badger. And while he's coming to take the stage, my understanding is that you're going to lay out, present to us your kind of pivot opportunity consideration.
Just kind of give you some context to what we're looking at. And just to kind of give you a preview, we're actually looking at a capital markets pivot, what I'm calling a capital markets pivot, not a product pivot. We've done plenty of product pivots in the past, but right now we actually have a product people are buying, and that's part of the dilemma of this. So I'll start out by telling you about our user. Our user is the field sales rep. I'm not talking about a field sales rep in technology, the guy who gets paid $300,000 and is basically a dying breed. This is maybe a medical device salesperson, distribution salesperson, gets paid $80,000 or $100,000, drives on a car 5 days a week, covers 500, maybe 1,000 accounts. So planning his day becomes a big problem for him. A lot of times he has 1 or 2 pre-planned meetings, and he wants to take those 1 or 2 pre-planned meetings in, say, Walnut Creek and San Jose. He wants to take that to 5 or 6 meetings and be able to kind of fill it in with lower priority accounts and prospecting. So that's his pain point. I'll sort of skip where this guy lives, just very briefly, all over the board. Title insurance, metal castings, hardware tools, snow and ice removal, weight loss centers. These are all customers of ours. So it's a broad market. These guys kind of live everywhere. A lot of times we find them through Google AdWords, and then once we get an early adopter coming to us, then we point direct sales guns at them and send out an email campaign. We've done some analysis, and worldwide, it's at least a few $1 billion market, we think, at our current price point. We basically do 3 things for our user. First of all, we have help them focus on the right customers. We basically are a complement to a CRM. So we have a CRM connector. We take the data, we put it in a geographic format, so the person can see who around them is important and however they define important. People I haven't seen in a long time. People are high volume customers. High priority versus low priority, et cetera. So it helps them filter out like who needs to be seen while they're out and about. And then we also bring in leads data. So we bring in third-party data, Google AdWords. In the future, we plan to partner with Dun & Bradstreet, Hoover's, people like that. So they're sort of marrying leads data with their own CRM data. And we provide the functionality to route and schedule and plan the day. And again, it's really an exercise of taking 2 or 3 meetings to 5 or 6 meetings. You dump more meetings in the top of your sales funnel, you're going to end up with more sales at the bottom. That's the idea. Other activity in the space, as you guys may know, Kleiner just invested in Telogis, mobile worker management software, so sort of an adjacency, and everybody knows about Waze. The idea being, if location is so important on the consumer side, why wouldn't it be on the enterprise side? That's sort of our thesis. Okay, so I don't really have a slide on traction, but just to give you a sense, in the last 75 days, we've gone from 2,300 a monthly revenue up to about 7,000 a monthly revenue. We've got 250 paid users, and have a bunch of deals in our pipeline. Actually have a contract out for signature that'll take us from 7,000 to about 14,000 of monthly revenue. It's early, still certainly seed stage, but we are getting traction. And so we've sort of pivoted our way to this point where customers are buying, looks like they're buying at a sort of profitable acquisition model. But the frustrating piece is, I guess I'll just kind of summarize what our takeaways are from talking to investors so far. So,
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So is your customer an end-use sales rep?
No, the ultimate customer is a corporation, so it's a sales ops buyer.
Okay.
But we also start some of those deals from the bottoms up. So we sell an individual license on our website to a lot of the end users. They get a few of their buddies to try it, and then the sales ops department hears about it, and then we go for a corporate sale. But if you look at our projections and even current revenues, it's 80-90% corporate revenues and 10-20% individuals. So I view those individuals kind of like a marketing tool, marketing expense. Yeah.
And what does it cost for one?
$18 for an individual per seat and $35 per user per month for companies. Companies get a bunch more bells and whistles. Yeah. But it's plain vanilla SaaS. So it's you're going to corporate buyer, per seat licensing. And so, we can show people analysis to, I think, convince people that we have a big market. We've been able to do that so far with investors. We can show traction. More traction is always good, but we have some traction. But I think what we're running into is what I have at the top of the slide here, the question of what do investors want? First of all, I think investors want big markets with customers that have a burning pain. Still early and debatable, but we think we've kind of found that. But second of all, they want high competitive barriers. I think they want barriers for competitors that don't exist yet. And that's where we're running into more of a problem, because we're not some of these business models that I have towards the bottom of the slide, marketplace, social application, big data, these all amount to what investors perceive as barriers, competitive barriers, whereas plain vanilla SaaS, at least early at the beginning, is very much an execution story, I think. And if you look at one of the, maybe the premier investor in SaaS companies, Emergence Capital, or one of the premier ones, they just had a big IPO with Viva. They don't do seed deals; they only do Series A. And to me, that's sort of a data point saying that investors just don't want to bet on the market leader before they're the market leader, because being the market leader is so important in SaaS. So I think that's kind of something that we're running up against. And we certainly have investors interested, and there's people in this room that have been to some of our investor presentations. But these are some of the challenges we've run into. And
how much have you raised today?
we're mainly bootstrapped. We've raised about $200,000 from friends, family, and some outside angel investors. And then we've got a couple angel groups, more professional angel groups, looking at us.
How much do you want to raise?
$1 million round. So between bootstrapping and friends, family, and everybody, we're about $400,000 through $1 million round. So we got 600 open still. So that's where we're at, and so we're sort of, I think, it's kind of faced with a capital markets pivot, because we've kind of got the story and customers are buying it, but geez, investors just aren't that excited about it. So how do we build something into it that gets them more excited? It's kind of at the bottom of this slide. You just can't see it, but we've always kind of had this idea of building a predictive search capability into our app. So you start with your 2 or 3 plan meetings, or you're going to 5 or 6. But right now we give the user the functionality and features to do all that work themselves, to go from 2 to 3 to 5 to 6. What if we actually made the app so it did it for them? So it learns where they're checking in, who they're visiting, and it looks at the data attributes out of the CRM, and it starts making. It just says, okay, here's your scheduled 2 to 3 meetings tomorrow on the route. Well, how about trying this other route where you hit these other 3 guys along the way? And that's I think that's resonating with people. But the irony is customers aren't asking for that. We're giving customers what they're asking for, and they're paying us for it. And someday I think they'll want this, because a user can only envision something that's incremental. It's hard to envision something that's a step function. This has always kind of been on our roadmap, but really in our mind it was on like a 12-month roadmap. And we sort of moved it up and made it on like the 3-month or 6-month roadmap to make this all kind of more interesting for investors. So that's kind of what we've done now. And there's investors have even had other ideas, like what if someday, once you have a big user base, you could either become a marketplace so that mid-sized companies that don't have a sales force could find salespeople in a local market, kind of create a marketplace, or crowdsourcing of local leads data. Which I think both are interesting, but for us as a startup that's bootstrapping, we want to get to a revenue model now, a business model now. So maybe someday it's interesting, but it's also not really what we want to make our core pitch. So that's kind of, I guess, that's kind of what we're faced with, is this capital markets pivot idea. Like, how do we? Is everything I've kind of laid out directionally correct? Would you guys say, well, no, that's not really how investors think? They actually think this way, or? I guess that's question number 1, and then question number 2, do you think we're on the right track? Do you have any other suggestions for things we could try?
SaaS companies are really hard to finance because they're only interesting at scale. So as you know, you're in that catch-22. Well, how do I get to scale if I don't have any financing? And Emergence, you mentioned, is one where I'm actually an investor in Emergence, so I'm happy they're not doing a seed. Because it's probably a higher failure rate if they were. So when I go back and look at your customer list, customer in terms of industry sectors, I'm surprised at the revenue run rate you're at, that it's so broad. And as an investor, I would be looking, is there a customer segment where you can really mine and get some real kind of flywheel traction with? I don't know. I don't know what the pickup rate has been or where, but I would look for that. It seems like you have an interesting application, but it's really, really broad, and if just even from a marketing, communication, and lead gen, to go after all of these different sectors just seems like an inefficient thing. I don't know.
Yeah, well, so how we came on this is a medical device. If you look at our true revenue base, probably 2/3 is medical device. Because from a sales standpoint, we have focused in really medical device, pharma, that area, because we figure these people have deep pockets, the earlier adopters of technology, they have very much a pain point in this area. And then once we started Google AdWords, all these people started finding us. So that was actually what told us, hey, this is a big market. But yeah, a lot of these have been kind of coming and finding us.
So the ones who are, so maybe exploring the ones who are coming and finding you, because your idea was medical device, I mean, you guys, but your idea was medical device because that's an obvious pain point, but maybe that's not going to be the biggest customer segment. If people are finding you naturally.
Well, I think it won't, because there's only 80,000 medical device reps in the U.S., and there's something like probably close to 1 million distribution sales reps in the U.S. So yeah, just kind of the way the numbers are, I mean, from a startup standpoint, because we're a startup and it just doesn't take that much to get off the ground. I mean, I think focusing on medical device still, I think, makes sense, because we have gotten some big customers in that area, and there's a lot of other customers that we're in conversations with. But yeah, I think I see what you're saying, because looking at that list, we sort of look scattered, but really kind of under the hood from a sales standpoint, we are focusing on, on that device.
And Joanna, were you getting at the point about taking more than the superficial knowledge from the customer, or finding new markets, or going deeper into certain markets? Is that right?
Yeah, well, if customers are, you're marketing to a customer segment, but if customers are coming to you without you really intentionally marketing to them, and if you test intentional marketing in that sector, you might have a much quicker adoption rate. And if you, I mean, from an investor standpoint, you need to create defensibility. The only way you're really going to create it, I think, besides coming up with new product offerings like predictive technologies, is to own a customer segment. Medical device is probably a tough one to own. It's probably one that more competition is going to look at because it looks big and obvious. But you might find that in beer packaging and tire distribution that no one's looking at, you become the dominant, product in that segment for sales reps, and that could be, then you've got some defensibility that you can build on. That's not so obvious to competition or anyone else. And you kind of sneaky build your way up to something that you have a defensible platform.
Okay, got it.
And also, I'm sorry to jump in here, but the other thing is that what would be investable and of interest to an emergence of a SaaS product is a few steps ahead of where you are in seeking maybe an A-round investor or a bigger super angel kind of investment. So that may be something also where the kinds of metrics that are appealing to an angel investor are going to look different from what an emergence is looking at.
I think emergence is just looking at it at a higher scale. I think they're an investor's looking for defensibility, a market segment that has its own kind of.
Yeah, okay. I see what you're saying. So if we can show high market share within a small little niche, then we can start to show something that's defensible.
And especially if you can show why that particular segment is buying you and not the competitor stuff. Because that's one of the threats here is that you're likely overlapping with software that could be used or could extend these features fairly easy, so that's a threat. But maybe some of these segments don't use that for whatever industry reasons, and so you're penetrating that part of the market. That one's a low entry point for a Salesforce.com type of software.
Right. Okay.
What's the smallest change you can make to the product so that you become a big data company?
Well, do you include like a machine learning capability with big data? Well, I mean, it's kind of the predictive thing. I mean, there's a machine learning algorithm that's going on there. And actually, the interesting thing with this that I didn't mention before is if you have a 200-person sales force, you're looking at check-in data from all those 200 people to make recommendations for each individual. And so, to a sales manager, that's very interesting because he's got this bottom 20% of reps that the beginning of his existence because he can never get them to behave like the top 20% of reps, and it sort of cross-levels these habits and kind of brings up the average. That's the idea, right? We still have to build it and prove that out. But I think that's the closest thing I can think of to kind of a big data play.
Yeah. I just, from pitching to an investor at any level, to be able to say, we are, our goal is to become the leading provider of this platform for, I would say, not early technology adopters maybe, with an average sales force of 200 reps or less, in, distribution industries that, like, you've got a tomato distributor, or, because I think there's probably a lot of, like, interesting niches that in aggregate could be kind of an interesting business that would then give you the platform to go after. And you'll probably iterate and be able to fine tune the product within that, and then go after something that is bigger and more attractive, like medical device or something. I just think starting there is probably, you're gonna end up spending, my guess is you're gonna spend a lot of money and not get as much traction.
Yeah.
And I'll say, it's actually amazing that people are finding you to give you money. It's an unusual thing to happen. So that's a pretty important thing if you can characterize that. What is it? Why are they seeking us out? What is it?
Oh, well, it's because it's mobile technology. I mean, these guys have only been carrying mobile devices for the last 12 months, and for the last 10 years, they've been using Microsoft MapPoint, which is a desktop application. They print out their route, and they take it with them, and they can't change on the fly. And mobile technology is what's created this opportunity.
And do pharmaceutical companies currently have more mobile technology? Do they?
Yeah, I think like 70% of reps have iPads, company-issued iPads at this point. Yes.
But I mean, that's again going kind of to these ancillary markets. Can you give us an example of customers that have come to you?
Well, I mean, it's all the people on the.
But I mean, even like an individual example of success, like an individual rep came and then you got the corporate account. Has that happened at all?
Let's see. Who's been inbound?
Yeah, Diamondback Drugs.
Okay, yeah, so there's a veterinary pharmacy company with 10 sales reps, and I think the director of sales found us on LinkedIn, and they didn't have a CRM, so we are the CRM now. So, yeah, there may be a play to be kind of a small, there's these small businesses out there that, have the sales force, the geography is very important to them, but they're small, because they're a small business, they don't really have a need for a CRM before. There's a quote from one of our prospective customers that said, what good's a CRM if it's not on the map? So there might be a play there.
How else are they discovering you? It's remarkable that people are finding you because this is such a non-obvious search.
There's a lot of searching going on for these specific keywords. People
Sales
people
mapping
search,
software, sales routing software.
Yeah, there's 20 combinations of keywords that we see over and over again that salespeople that have this pain point keep looking for. And if you're the tomato distributor in Michigan, you are covering the whole state of Michigan, and this is really useful to you. And you're like, God, I have a mapping problem, and I know this exists for consumers. Can I get it for my business data?
That's actually insane. Yeah, there was one sales guy that found us, and now we're in a sales cycle with 17 CPO.
So my guess is that if you're listening, back to what we talked about, listening to the market's telling you something, and that when people are searching for you because they don't have another solution and they don't have sophisticated CRM, that to me is probably an interesting market segment that you can really own, especially if you listen, you figure out those first few customers and then figure out how to more strategically target them. You might get that real flywheel growth.
Yeah, we've thought about that a lot, and also it's interesting how many companies have a CRM, especially small companies. They have a CRM that's effectively non-functional. So no one uses it. They've spun up, SAP's CRM system, but nobody's using it. They maybe use it for a forecasting tool. That's all. So you're dead on. Like we're almost solving two pain points. We're solving an outside salesperson's pain point, and we're solving the mobile CRM pain point in one. That when we've been able to do that, that's when we've done a lot of our early sales here.
If, again, from an investor standpoint, that's actually interesting. I mean, that would make me excited to say, here's my card and let's talk tomorrow, because it's a market segment that you could really own and dominate. That's not obvious to everyone else. Everyone's going to go after pharmaceuticals. It's too obvious.
And the bigger firms want to go in and charge $500,000 to put something in, and smaller firms, but there's a lot more smaller firms than there are big firms. And you're coming out of organically, elementally, and you can penetrate the market. Apparently your distribution is pretty cheap. It's this cost of customer acquisition is where you're targeting, and if you can do it by search and deliver that easily, that's a different approach than what the big companies are having to do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you guys want to sit right there for this evening?
Yeah. Sure. Why not? Run out. Yeah. Did you have a comment while?
Having mobile,
Yeah.
going place to place, and if you can route and have a CRM system connect where you make your own CRM system, that'd be great. Where now you have automatic birthday reminders and everything along with not just driving, but here's this person's birthday, come by here to say happy birthday while you're on your route to see your person. I think that'd be
Have
great.
you had any insurance salespeople? That's an interesting.
Yeah, we've talked to a few companies that have insurance companies. One really big one that's an interesting one because they, a large company will try to pull you in the direction that's interesting to them, and then a few smaller plays that are also interesting.
Cool.
And if you put that CRM with birthdays and anniversaries for every person,
Listen,
along
you
with
should
it.
you should give him some advice on after the session. That's great, thank you. That's great.
Yeah, I don't think the videos on here, so I'm just
Hi, I'm Julian Ivan, founder of Blank Shop. Initial idea was that you can create these different shops or curations based on different interests. I wanted to keep it really broad so that it would allow me to pick up a really wide range of products. Again, it's something that kind of grew organically over time. I started as a designer, making my own shirts and designs and apparel, and then started making accessories, and it was all wood inspired. Then I went out and I started finding a lot of other folks who were doing awesome things that had a very similar aesthetic, and it kind of all went together. And so my first shop was a wood shop. One of the most unique things that we do as a retailer is that we try to make it easier to purchase unique products with a deeper meaning and purpose. All the products, we try to pair them with social and environmental causes. For instance, we have like a wooden watch where for every watch sold, a tree is planted. So different things like that to give back to the community in meaningful ways. There's kind of 3 sets of criteria that we use to select the brands that we work with and feature. And number 1 is the aesthetic kind of component, and it's got to look cool, it's got to stand out. And the second thing is that it's got to have kind of that social or environmental mindset. And then aside from all that, the third thing would have to be the value. Just want to make sure that whatever that product is, that it's actually affordable, or at least a great value, so that it makes sense for them to buy it. So one of the main things I love about Store Envy is actually the price, because it's free, you can't beat it, it's really easy, you get set up in pretty much no time. It's a way for me to really scout and kind of scour the internet for good products. What I would really like to do is hopefully continue to try to bridge the gap with this kind of offline and online world. One of the things I'm excited about is to be working with other brands and figure out ways to continue on the vision of what the meaning was behind Blank Shop in the first place. For me, it was like a way to help other people do what they want to do, what they're passionate about.
So I just wanted to show that video just because I feel like anything that I explained wouldn't make a lot of sense if you didn't get the visuals that went along with everything that I do. So to kind of just go back into it and kind of show it to you. So welcome. So Blank Shop again, the tagline is fill in the blank shop what you love. That's why it's called Blank Shop, because we come up with different shops. Again, the first one in the video that I mentioned that I started off with was a wood shop. Really inspired by like wood grain aesthetics, all that. So I had a line that was all wood grain, whether that's like the wooden watches or like wooden ties when I wear all that stuff. Just pulled it all together into one shop, made it one cohesive shop. This is the homepage that you'd see right now if you were to go online. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that. And to quickly talk about my background, again, I started off doing apparel and accessory design. This is some of the pieces that I worked on initially. And yeah, eventually, I went and did a lot of shows, like a lot of designers, and I would go out and sell Basically, I started meeting a bunch of other folks, other designers that also would go out to these like different events and shows and sell their art and products and stuff as well. And I started hearing the same issues from all these people, and it was usually like sales and marketing related. Like all they want to do as designers is like focus on their product, design, make, and they don't really want to be selling a lot of their products. And so what I ended up doing was like, since I was going to all these shows, I started asking all these designers, all my other friends, why don't I just sell this product for you? So I would just take their products and then bring it to the shows, and it kind of eventually grew into a retail business. So that's how that started. As a tagline, we're an online retail store, and what makes us unique is that we make it easier to purchase unique products with a deeper meaning and purpose. So we go out, curate all these products, but what we do is we tie everything back to a cause, to give back. And an example of that is going to be this woman, Misty, who actually reached out to us through social media. She told us her story. Basically, to give you a really quick rundown of it, she was born with spina bifida. She's lived a really, like normal life up until, like she goes out, drinks, has fun, all that stuff. But one day she decided, she woke up, she was like, I don't want to be living this type of lifestyle, I want to be living more positively. And so she made it a goal to run like a full-on marathon. But if you can imagine, she doesn't have working legs. And so she kind of has to use her walker to walk. But since then, we've kind of sponsored her through her first races. And she's taking baby steps. She's gone through her 7Ks, half marathons, and now she's kind of like projected a date in February to take on her first full marathon, which is amazing. So this is like a personal cause. It's not necessarily a nonprofit, but that's what makes us unique, is that we're willing to work with people even on like a very personal level, and not just like big nonprofit organizations. So this is just a simple dream that I really want to kind of help everybody, and I found out that I can do it through the convergence of kind of consumerism and philanthropy. So where are we now as a company? We have the blankshop.com online web store that we're continuing to build more as a platform, a retailer to try to curate a really broad range of products. We also sell through other channels. Some people might consider those as competitors. I see them as other channels. Store Envy being one of them, Square Market being another, and many, many more that we sell through. And then I also attend weekly fashion lifestyle events in the Bay Area and beyond, where we sell the products and promote the brand. The pictures over here are actually from Runway, the Predator Porter event. So I showcased the line and basically tried to promote our online store. And right now we also have a pop-up shop in the Crocker Galleria, and that's with Store Envy. It's just like 8 minutes away from here. And that's been going on since April for me, and we're continuing it until the end of the year. And that's a picture of the Store Envy pop-up. And just to quickly talk about kind of the market competitive environment. I consider, I guess, like other brands such as Tom's as kind of an example of the other types of players in the market, but obviously the retailers as well. Some of them like Roost and Ethical Ocean, based out of Canada. But what they do is they're very focused in kind of the socially conscious and environmentally friendly kind of niche, and that they won't really sell any products that don't fit that criteria. So that's also what sets us apart, is instead of just doing a product that's built from the ground up to be socially responsible, we're willing to we're willing to basically sell any product out there. And again, what makes us unique is that we are going to be giving a portion of our profits back to a cause or charity of your choice. That's kind of like the big thing. So that could be items or products that you buy from even Amazon or anything else. If you buy it through us, once we offer it through our site, then we'll donate a portion of it back to a retailer. We're not talking even about like 5%, 10%. We can give up to 100% of our markup margin, so anywhere up to like 50% or whatnot. So it's a huge, huge market compared to what anyone else is doing right now. But we are for profits, we're not necessarily non-profit, but we have the ability to kind of play both sides. The other markets that we're interested in are food and craft fair events. What I see here is that there are a lot of folks putting together these events for all these, so it's more offline, right? It's not online, it's offline. So they're putting together these craft fairs, marketplaces, if you will, where people can go and buy all these different independent designers and brands. But it stops there. It's not, it can't be found online. Like, you can't go online to one of their websites and like buy products after the event. It's only there and then, and afterwards it's gone. The pop-ups and mobile commerce space, so there's companies out there like Storefront, who's kind of, to me, what I see as the kind of the leader in this space, in that they're finding these pop-up spaces and allowing people the opportunity to pursue it. So that ties in with Store Envy, which is what I'm involved with now. I'm in the pop-up shop, and then also the other side would be mobile commerce, so like Topshop Boutique, which is a mobile fashion truck. What I see with this is that, you know, I think it's an emerging trend that I really want to be a part of, and I think would make a lot of sense for what we're doing right now, because it's really like, you need kind of an offline component to go along with the online, just to kind of tell the stories, and so a lot of our products like have like really deep stories, and you need to be able to convey that to the end consumer. So where are we going? So kind of going off that, what we're doing and where we might be headed in terms of pivot kind of opportunities. The pop-ups and mobile commerce, so continue to figure out a way to bridge a gap between the offline and online retail world. I think, again, there's a lot of opportunity there to continue to do that. Yeah, if you can imagine just going to like, you know, like a store, you know, where you can buy something online, but then you can buy it from the store, because like a lot of people, when they go to let's say an online store, like they haven't touched the product, and this is actually, you know, a really valid concern. I think like Best Buy might have been back then a good example of that, when they're losing a lot of their market share to like a bigger retailer like Amazon, where people go into the store to Best Buy and they'll touch and feel the product, but they won't purchase it there. They'll purchase it online on like Amazon for a cheaper price. Second one would be event production and sponsorship. So we put on events like Black Market SF, which is actually going to be this Saturday in the city. It creates a lot of publicity and buzz around it because it's a really exclusive event. It's cool, and we have the opportunity to spread this this night market that we're doing in London, New York, through some partners that we have right now. And then the last thing is to kind of maybe go back and do like my own brand with a partner who has an existing brand. I'd show the video, but I think I'm almost out of time. But their brand's called Ministry of Tomorrow, and what they do that's unique and different is that they have created a manufacturing plant out in Kenya, where they actually develop the products and empower the local workforce over there, pays them 3 times the minimum wage to make their bags or apparel. They even have control over the production down from the sourcing of the cotton. So why this is important for me is because it allows you to have full control over the brand and the vision from start to finish. And that way it'll be like a really authentic, transparent story that you can convey back to the end consumer. So that's the homepage that you'd see on Ministry of Tomorrow's site. Again, there's a video that would talk more about what they're doing there. Oh, I just put that clip art there, and I did not know it did that. But show your support by letting us know what causes you'd like to support. So while you know, whenever I go to events or anything like that, one of the things I always like to ask for is to again figure out what causes the community, the consumer wants us to support. Because in the end, like this is a growing platform where we take in the causes, and we can only support them if you let us know what these causes are. So I usually have a little bottle with a question mark on it, and that's where I ask people to write down what their causes are that they want us to support. But yeah, maybe I can pass out cards after it, and that's it. So I can.
I'm going to come back around. So-
Ask questions, or?
Yeah, exactly. So you were gonna, yeah, you might want to have clarifying questions answered prior to. But Julian, what you were looking to get out of this is also some response to the 3 different scenarios or options you were considering. Okay. Go for it.
You're clearly creative. I'm struggling to understand what business you're in. Because are you a platform that solves problems for designers in terms of giving them a distribution outlet? Are you a multi-brand platform for a certain customer segment? I actually thought when I went on your website earlier, apartments were apartment listings because what I found out they were products for an apartment, but I wouldn't expect that on your home. So obviously that's a certain mindset, a certain age group that would think in that way. So I guess I'm struggling. And then do you take inventory of product, and do you handle the distribution? Or are you just a front end platform?
So initially, when we started, we did carry products. We bought product at more wholesale. Now we've switched over to dropshipping and consignment space. So majority of our products we don't have to carry inventory for.
How big do you want this to be?
It's huge. I want it to be so big that it could make a dent in like Amazon's e-commerce platform. Just because, again, it's about taking market share in e-commerce. Right?
Sure.
There's so many giants out there that it's what you can do different to try to stand out. So,
Can you work backwards from that?
in what sense?
Like, to say big and painful to Amazon is one thing, but to be able to say, okay, so we're big enough to where, we've got $1 billion of revenue or something. Can you see that happening from a curated marketplace where you have very unique products? And by definition, it's not unique if there's enough scale where everyone's got the same thing, right? But I think it's very interesting and important because gone will be the Sears and the Kmarts of the world, and there will be people buying premium luxury brands, and then on the other end, not necessarily cheap, but really, really craft and unique stuff that's not luxury mass market like Kors.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah. So can you work backwards where you say this could be as big as an Etsy, right?
Well, see, that's.
You can do it, Mike.
Oh yeah, sorry. So that's why what I'm hoping to kind of do different from, again, anyone else is that I want to be able to cater to kind of both crowds and markets. I know that I've been getting a lot of advice, only pick one, only do one, like focus on that, niche that, whatever. But how I see it in terms of a bigger vision is that I do want to offer kind of everything. That's why I use Amazon as an example, even though it's a huge, huge giant to go up against. And that's always advisable to just niche it. But what I want to do again is to offer these same products that you can purchase from other places, but just have this kind of cause side to it where you literally, like, we have their same margins, or we can work with these margins, and we can, really make a difference because it's disrupting like what they're currently doing. Like right now, they have so much they have to pay for if there's brick and mortar, or if it's online. Like they're just they make a certain amount in terms of margin, but we can take away from that based on basically this model of retail.
But I agree, you're kind of all over the map on this,
Right.
and that shows incredible creativity. I will absolutely applaud you on that, and good selection, curating as well. I think you are able to define something that's sort of a theme there with each one of those things, but those margins get eaten up by expenses.
Right.
You can't do everything and be special at the same time.
Right.
So somehow you're going to have to. Yeah, I do think you have something that you could possibly coalesce around, like these events. I think that certainly sounds like something your lifestyle would really like, and that can be scaled, like event management type of activities. And I have see too many of those maker fairs, something comes to mind, for example. Or are you an online entity that curates, and now you're competing with a lot of other activities. Now, you can, in that sense, you can create your own brand of how you do that, but you can't do everything and be special.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I'm still, because I'm really trying to understand what is the reason a consumer is going to go to you to buy a product is because you're going to give a portion of the margin away to a charity. Is that the value proposition?
So, I mean, that's perfectly understandable because that is kind of what we're doing. Like, even though that is kind of what makes us unique and different, our approach is not that. So that's why it is kind of confusing because we do have to cater to like more of like a lifestyle is what you guys are calling it. But it is kind of like behind the scenes. Like most people don't buy products because of, unless it's certain, it's like it's just an added benefit at the very end. And that's kind of how we want to approach it. So that's why there's a higher kind of focus on curation because the products have to be something that someone actually wants to buy. There's got to be a stronger focus on value because it's got to be, you know, at a certain price point that makes sense. But after those two things, what on top of that is what I'm saying. On top of that, we are giving back to the community in, you know, large ways, or we can. We would be able to do that.
This value added of curating, though, is a value. And you could actually play on that because a lot of artists and makers do not want to do the sales and distribution and the business side of anything. And you've made that part of what you do creatively. So you're almost there, but it does need to become a business somehow. And this is the value that I am adding. And it is maybe sales and distribution and creating those events. That's what you multiply.
Have you seen CD Baby?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like Derek Sivers, a friend, he did this exactly the same way. The reason why you're doing it, except for musicians, the thing is, their products are easily pirated and your products are not. So you have like a huge advantage for a sustainable model. But it's been proven that it can work. And I think that he had really high volume too. But in the end, it wasn't a billion-dollar company, right? So when you talk about curation and products that are edgy, you're talking about early adopters who will buy it, right? I mean, your customers are early adopters in culture and taste. They're just weird, right? And they have great taste. I mean, it's awesome. I was there at the fashion show at Runway, and it was, it was clear that all the designers were going after early adopters. Right? There's early adopters in tech. There's early adopters in fashion as well. But then, it's still. I think the reason why you're asking about a pivot is, well, you're saying I want to find a pathway to become big, right? And I don't know how you're addressing that from, well, how do you get your products to the mass market, right? Being that you're curating for early adopters.
So just based on everyone's input, it sounds like an interesting proposition for the company might be, we're the curator of all of these very unique designers that are committed to design, and we become their platform. Whether you do it through pop-up shops or parties, those are just marketing events or ways to aggregate and get more customers to move online ultimately and buy. So that's just marketing. That's not a strategy for the company. The strategy for the company is an online platform. And the defensible position is the fact that you're able to, I would think, with your unique ability to kind of filter a specific aesthetic or what could be cutting edge design, bring all of these incredible designers together, and people would continue, maybe early adopters, but people would continue to go back because to always see what's new, what's coming next. What's the cool new watch or the cool thing for my apartment or, the new skirt or whatever it may be, if you can continue to do that online with, again, marketing platforms being pop-up shops and, other things. And then you don't have to take inventory and That to me sounds like you could create a defensible position. The way you presented it to me doesn't sound defensible, and so those aren't really pivots, those are just kind of lack of focus on what you're really about.
Are you looking for investment also?
Definitely, but yeah, why do you ask?
Because I don't think you're going to attract venture capital.
Not at all.
So you might find people that are interested in this field that want to be part of that scene, but it's going to be like that friends and family style investment. And one thing to remember is venture capital fits a certain type of situation which capital can rapidly expand something to high scale. But most businesses are small businesses. $5 to $10 million can make an enormous amount of personal profit if you do the right thing. So that's to say, keep your realistic scope here.
Cool.
Okay. Any other questions you want to ask?
No, I mean, maybe personally, I'd love to speak to you guys. Also looking for advisors, if anybody. Excellent. Thank you.
Excellent.
Julian, thank
Thanks.
you very much. I think we're coming towards the end of our time together. I don't know if there were any other burning questions anybody has. If we have a couple extra remaining moments, then maybe the best thing is that we wind down now and folks might be available to answer any individual questions you might have. So, oh, and also I'm told that there is a survey or questionnaire at your seat, so please feel free to fill that out so that the people who put this panel together can have some good advice about the next events. But thank you very much to the hosts here. This was really wonderful.
Does anybody need a pen to fill out their?
You are not table ornaments, they're actually for you to take home. Feedback on future events that might be useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.